lounging, son.
All right, welcome back to the Comic Lounge. My name is Ryan, and back with me again, Joshua Williamson, one of my favorite writers in comics. He's absolutely killing it at DC. New indie book just dropped earlier this year, or I guess late last year. So I'm super stoked to have you
Yeah.
back, talk some comics with you.
Yeah, me
Um,
too, dude. How long has it been? Is it
I
last
think
year or is it 2 years?
I think it was last year. I think it was before you launched. Like Deathstroke wasn't out, Robin wasn't out, so it
Oh
was
man, so it's been almost 2 years then,
yeah.
because Robin was May of, or it was March and April of 2021. Yeah, it's been a while, dude.
Yeah, it's been a while. So I mean, I'll just jump right into it. Let's talk,
Yeah, let's
you
talk about
just
comic books.
yeah, Dark Crisis. You just ended that very ambitious event. I think anytime the word crisis is thrown around in DC, it's always,
Yeah,
something you got to keep your eye on. But it was like while it was a big story, it also felt very intimate. Like it was a very quiet
yeah.
type of crisis. It wasn't as big as say like, the original Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Well, yeah, because I didn't want to necessarily, it's funny when you do any of these kinds of books at DC. It was funny, I would see this commentary sometimes. People are like, "Oh, it's too much like Crisis," or "It's too much like Infinite Crisis," and then I would see occasionally, "Oh, it doesn't feel like a crisis," and I was like, "That's because it's not those things. It wasn't
Mhm.
intended to be those things. It's supposed to be its own version of a crisis." And it was like, when you go into those kinds of things, this is true of any superhero book or any Marvel or DC book. When you go into it, you got to find ways of making it your own, and that's how I felt with Crisis, where it was like, I can't replicate the success that Marv Wolfman and George Perez did, and I think the stuff that Jeff and Phil Jimenez did, like they had their own thing. So for us, our priorities are different, and it was like, okay, I know what I want to do with this story, and it's like I wanted to show a crisis event from different points of view, but yeah, make it a bit more emotional. Make it a bit more of an intimate story. And it's not just about worlds crashing into each other. It's about those characters, and that was why I did the way I did it. But it's funny, dude. Like I've said this a few times recently, where it's like my only I would never call it regret, but it's like whenever you finish a big project, your brain automatically goes to how you would do it differently because now you get to see it. I
Mhm.
imagine for you, it's like you look at a canvas, you finish the painting, you take a step back, and you're like, oh, I would do this different. You
Well, that's
know?
my wife's art. That's my wife's art behind me.
Oh, it's red. Oh, okay. Well, maybe she knows that too, though.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
just
yeah.
take a
No,
step
she does.
back, and she's like, "Oh man, I keep touching it." But I think what's funny about comics, right? Like that's comics are monthly, dude. Technically, they're weekly, so you gotta let them go. You gotta be like, "All right, I did it." But that was the thing I learned about it. Was like I've always been an advocate for faster events. Like I wish events were faster.
Same.
Uh, and then Dark Crisis was like a year long, practically. So it's tough because it's like in some ways I wish that I had more issues with Dark Crisis. Like I feel like I had a 12-issue story that we shoved into 7 issues. I especially felt that toward the ending, toward the last 2 issues, particularly the last one. But at the same time, I was like, I can't go past 7 issues because I don't want this to keep going forever. So it's a weird mix of things. I think if I could go back, I probably my original plan when I pitched it was to have it be a double ship.
Mhm.
And I think I would have. I think I would have. It was impossible to do that for scheduling reasons, but I do think there are times where I'm like, oh, I wish I had done that double ship. Could have been faster. That would be my one thing. Was I wish we could have been a little faster with it. It's a lesson you learn.
Mhm. I don't feel like it dragged though. There's some events that I feel like for me drag out. I guess I mean it was monthly, but it didn't feel. It felt like it went at a pretty good pace, at least for
Yeah,
me.
I didn't like that. That's where I say the flip comes. Is like I wish I had more issues,
Hmm.
to do, especially when I got toward the ending. But I'm still really proud. I say all that. I'm really proud of it. I'm particularly proud and in awe of the work that Daniel Sampere did because
Oh, it's fantastic.
like he killed it every issue and he really went for it. And I think it's gonna be a beautiful book when it's all said and done, like when it's collected, because I think he really really went for it. Like he really went for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a beautiful book. There's a couple things like first of all, Nightwing is very centric in the story, which he's one of my
Mhm.
favorite characters. And for a while, I wasn't really digging what they were doing with him. I love what you did with him in Dark Crisis. I like what Tom Taylor's been doing
Yeah,
for almost 20 issues or a little over 20 issues now.
yeah,
I love what I read recently, though. I like how you wrote Nightwing represents legacy and Deathstroke represents the hate and death of legacy.
yeah, yeah.
I
That's
love
it
I
right
love
there.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I
because
thought
it is. Yeah, that was my whole thing with it. Was I when I was coming up with the idea of the book, I was like, how are these characters feel about legacy, right? So it was like, well, Nightwing represents it. You know, Barry and Wally in some ways also represent it because of the passing of the torch, but Dick Grayson is first. You know, he's the first sidekick. He's the first, like, I'm bringing you in a situation. And then yeah, Deathstroke hates legacy because of the stuff with his kids, but then someone like Black Adam is kind of neutral. He's kind of in the middle because it's like he doesn't hate it necessarily, but he also sees the danger in it because of what happened the last time he embraced legacy during 52.
Right.
And those characters died, you know, and it was painful for him. So I kept all that stuff in mind when I was working on it, of like, you know, Hal also embraces it, but embraces it differently because Hal doesn't have children. Hal doesn't have sidekicks, but he has partners, you know, and he's built his own family of the Green Lantern characters. So I kept looking at that stuff of like, what does legacy mean to different people? And that was what, yeah. But Nightwing's this, Deathstroke's this, and I knew it was always going to come out of Deathstroke. It was fun. I kept trying to explain to people. I'm like, listen, this event is going to be different than you expect, because I knew the giant cosmic fight was going to be in 6, and then 7 was going to be the much more grounded 2 people fighting, even though there was cosmic stuff going on. But you know, coming down to like Deathstroke versus Black Adam and Nightwing being there, I knew that was going to be the thing from the beginning, that it was eventually come up a much more personal battle. You know, it was just going to be like a ton of two-page spreads with a million characters, which we still had that. But issue 6 was the real heavy one, and then issue 7 was the like, no, it's coming down to these 2 people and these 2, you know, because that was it, right? Because it was like Deathstroke's over here, he hates it. Nightwing represents it. Black Adam is in the middle, and he fluctuates throughout the book, right? In the beginning, he hates it, and then he kind of like issue 1, he's like, all these new characters suck, and then at the end of issue 2, he's like, no, you know what? I'm gonna take charge. I'm gonna bring these new kids in. And then issue 3, he's like, no, they really do suck. I'm gonna go to the villain side of things, right? And then issue 4, he's working with them, and then he sees what Deathstroke shows up, and everything gets bad, you know. And then issue 5, he gets saved by those new kids, right? Because like Sideways is there, and Nightwing, so he comes back around to it. And then in 5 and 6, he sees that these new kids are willing to sacrifice themselves to save the day, and he sees these new kids are actually, you know, heroes in their own right and are stepping out of the shadow. And he kind of keeps fluctuating, and then he gets to the end of 6, and he's like, "We are fucked," because of Deathstroke. But then in 7, that's when he's, you know, he takes a stand, and he's like, "No, I would die for them," and he's able to kind of see, like, he ends up becoming in that moment where it's like, you know, Deathstroke is like, I'm gonna kill Nightwing and Rose and kill Ravager, and then Black Adam is the one that steps in the way, and that was me playing with those ideas and having Black Adam say like, no, legacy is a good thing, and him standing there in the way of it. That was, so it was all this huge map of that, to just have that back and forth between the two, and then have him, you know, it was fun having Black Adam be the one to go on that journey.
Yeah, I mean, I dug the series. I mean, I think that's also, I think you know, I've talked about it. Like, legacy is what makes DC stand apart from like Marvel.
Yep.
And I think that that's what makes DC so special. So like, to make this crisis event about legacy was really fucking awesome choice on your part, I think. And I think that it was one of my favorite events in a long time, because I sometimes I get really like, I don't want another fucking event. I need a break. Like, I don't want event after event. And sometimes, you know, the other publisher will do a lot of like little events like back to back where you don't have time to breathe. But this didn't feel like that, and it's one of the few times where like I'll pick up all the tie-ins. You know, I won't always do that, but I wanted like every aspect of this of the story, you know.
I think events is tough, dude. I mean, you know, for both big 2 publishers, events are really hard to manage, and they're really hard to pull together. And like you're saying, do them in a way that feels like they matter, and in a way that it feels emotional, and it actually tells a story. It's big explosions. But the other thing to consider, this is the reality, is that like, and I think this all the time, you know, because again, I'm a fan of comics. I've been reading comics my whole life. I worked at the shop, you know, and it's like I've been there. I've been that reader of Marvel and DC. You know, obviously I'm over here now, but it's like I'm still that person. I still buy comics. I still read comics. The reality of events is that they sell. You know, and that's why there's so many of them. You know, it's tough. I always think about this too, where I'm always like, I wish we could cut back every once in a while. But then every once in a while, you also are like, well, I have a big idea and a big story. Let's do it. And everybody gets excited about it, you know? So it just depends. But yeah, it is funny how I wish we did have time every once in a while to react a little bit more. And we are conscious of that now, I think, more. Like the conversation I have with the creators, the conversation I have with editorial. And it's like, what constitutes an event? You know, what's a line Y? What's a crossover? You know, does that count as an event? No, it shouldn't, you know.
Yeah.
But it's definitely something we talk about, you know, because we're fans too, you know, we're fans
Right.
too. So we definitely talk about that stuff of like what you know, event fatigue, because that's actually what, you know, it's funny, like when death metal ended, we went into Infinite Frontier, and if Infinite Frontier was actually about event fatigue. Like that to me, that miniseries we did, that's what it was about. You know, that's why Director Bones is kind of talking about like this has to stop, and that was about event fatigue. It
Yeah.
was like if you really go back and look at issue 1, that's what it was kind of about. Because everybody's like, oh my god, all this stuff with the multiverse is exhausting. Like that was what we were doing, you know.
Yeah.
And then a year after that, we did Dark Crisis. I remember some people were like, oh my god, it's only been a year, and I'm like, no, it's been 2 years.
Okay.
It's actually been longer. But that's, I mean, I like the meta stuff a little bit, maybe too much, but that is something I do think about. Is that are those pieces?
Yeah, I love the meta aspects of stories like that, especially when it's like,
Yeah.
you know, like unless you're like a really diehard comics fan, you may not even pick out some of those things.
Oh
But
yeah,
I
yeah,
love finding out, I love finding those things. And you know, again, like I like events, but when it has to be good, you know, like to me it has to be
well,
consequential.
sure.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it has to also, for me, like at least be consequential. There has to be some sort of a change. If it's like it just
Yeah.
status quo again at the end of it, or nothing really happens, then I'm like, well, then
Hmm.
why even have it? But you know, I think that this probably was one of my favorite events in a long time. And I'm not just saying that to you.
No,
Like
thanks,
I
man.
love DC, I love the characters, and I think that this was an event for DC fans. You know, I think casual
Yeah.
fans too could pick it up, but I think you're really rewarded as a DC fan because you always
That.
throw in characters that like if you have been reading DC a long time, like you'll know them. Like when you did like Cobalt Blue in the future
Oh
state,
yeah.
you know, like
Yeah.
you'll throw in these like little characters that not everybody knows, and like that's
Hmm.
probably one of my favorite aspects of your writing is like I know you love DC, and then like it comes through every
Yeah, I know all this stuff.
yeah,
Well, it's always Dark Crisis. Like that's the separation between Dark Crisis and Superman.
yeah,
And even Green Arrow, because it's like, you know, with Dark Crisis was definitely written a bit more for like if you're a DC fan, you know, if you follow DC and not just follow DC in terms of the story, but you kind of follow DC as a company, you know, as a publisher. I think
mhm,
there was something for you to chew on when it came to that book. You know, I tried to input as much of that stuff as I could into it. I think it definitely is something where it's like if you are a DC fan, you were gonna get more from that story, you know.
mhm,
Whereas then with Superman, one of my goals for Superman was to make it as accessible as possible. Like if you haven't read DC Comics for 5 years or ever, you got what you needed, you know. If you haven't been reading it, I really try to gear Superman as like a jumping on point as much as I could. I really try to spend a lot of time in that space to try to make it like that. So it's just different muscles, and also because I'd done so much of it with Dark Crisis, but then with Green Arrow, because Green Arrow spins out of Dark Crisis,
mhm.
and does stuff with Dawn of DC. Green Arrow is probably more written for Green Arrow fans. You know, it's much more about that than than Superman is. Like Superman's very accessible. I think Green Arrow's accessible, but it's for Green Arrow fans.
Yeah.
It's, you
Let's
know,
talk a little bit about Green Arrow because I
yeah,
was
go
gonna
ahead.
talk Superman first, like that's like how I have my
Yeah,
bullet points, but
yeah.
when last time we talked, you told me that you had a pitch
Oh,
for Green Arrow, and then you told
yep.
me I think you were gonna let, and then other people had some pitches for it, and you kind of want to let somebody else take it because you
Oh
want to do
man,
Robin.
so we definitely. Oh my god, yeah. Okay, so you and I probably talked earlier than I think we did. Uh, you know, I have tried to write Green Arrow for like 20 years. Even early of me talking to DC, it was known that I wanted to write Green Arrow. Never worked out. Never worked out. Every time there's a Green Arrow #1, so you have like Brightest Day Green Arrow, New 52 Green Arrow. I was always like, God, I really want to write this character, and I would pitch for stuff. And even when I was doing like little side jobs, I would try to get Green Arrow in there, and then he'd get cut. It was like a joke, you know. Even when I started working on a regular basis, Ben Percy and I, when he was doing Green Arrow during Rebirth, we would talk a lot about let's do a Flash Green Arrow crossover, particularly because at the time the TV shows were so popular in that moment, and that was just the Flash show and the Green Arrow show. We were like, we should try that. It never worked out. And there were times where it would be like, oh, I'm going to put Green Arrow in this story. And then an editor would be like, oh, that doesn't work. We can't use him. I'm like, oh my God. And it just kept happening. And then I feel like the first time I really actually wrote Green Arrow was in the Infinite Frontier special, where we had like a 2-page sequence where basically all I did was bring Roy back from the dead.
Right.
And it was funny because I spent 2 years writing everyone but Ollie, because I was like, I wrote Dinah, I brought Connor back,
Yeah.
Connor Hawk back, I got Roy back from the dead. I was able to start bringing these pieces in, but not actually writing Ollie. And then I felt bad because it was like, you know, when I was working on Justice League 75, I was like, oh man, he's gonna be the character that gets hit the hardest, you know, and he's gonna be the one that we think is dead. And I remember being like, I can't believe that like the first time I get to really write Green Arrow, I'm going to kill him. You know, he's the one that gets the most brutal death. And I think because that meant a lot to me, I knew that would mean a lot to other people. But yeah, that's the truth, dude. Like back in 2010, maybe 9, I remember talking to Ben Abernathy, who's the executive editor of DC Comics. He was still at DC. He had left for a little bit, but this is back then. He was at DC, and we were talking about pitches, and I pitched him a Green Arrow thing. He was doing digital first at the time. You know, they were doing all these like digital first books
Right.
back then. And I pitched him a Green Arrow one. He was like, "No, it's not going to work. We're already kind of doing something. We have a plan for Green Arrow, or for a variety of reasons, it didn't work." And I think that was the last time I really pushed for Green Arrow. And then, you know, I mean, in terms of me doing a book, right?
Right.
So even last year, the last couple of years, I feel like it got close. Like I had different friends pitch, I had different friends talk to them. Like I had multiple. I mean, we're talking about multiple people and like name people, and it just never worked out for a variety of reasons. You know, it was never anything personal. It was always stuff that just like timing, what was going on at the company at the time, also resources. Like it just didn't come together. And so we were talking about the end of Dark Crisis, and originally I was going to do the reunion stuff in Dark Crisis, and I just ran out of room. And I was like, I can get the Green Arrow family back together in 2 panels, or I could do it in like a one shot. And we started talking about that one shot, and then that one shot became the miniseries. And then the hope is if the miniseries sells, it can be turned into an ongoing. But I couldn't even believe it. Like when that process kind of came together, I was like, this is not gonna happen. Like, and Ben, I remember Ben was like, well, do you want to do it? And it just happened to be at a moment where I had room in the schedule, and I was like, I can make this happen. And then writing issue 1, it's up there and probably the fastest things I've written, because I knew it, man.
Yeah.
I knew exactly what that comic was gonna be. I knew exactly what I was gonna do with it, and it just came together so fast. And it's been wild. I'll tell you this, like the moment we announced I was doing Green Arrow #1, I had so many friends text me and just be like, "Holy shit, dude, you did it!" Like, holy crap, you did it. Way back, I think way back in like, was it 2006? I have to look. I had a moment in my, you know, I would say career, but when I was starting out and just trying to break in, and you have all the hits and misses, and things don't work, and you can't get books approved, and you know, this is again long time ago. I was much younger, and I had those moments where I'm like, it's never gonna happen. I'm never gonna work in comics. I'm never gonna be a comic writer. I need to give up and go work on something else, like go do whatever else, you know, like work as a designer, which I had been doing at the time, or just got to figure something else out. It's not going to happen.
Mhm.
And a friend of mine who's an artist, we were talking about it, and he knew how bummed out I was, and how I was in a very like, this is not going to happen kind of thing. And he knew one of the ideas I had for Green Arrow that I wanted to do, and he basically drew a pinup of it. He drew a pinup of that image of Green Arrow, and he was like, "I'm giving this to you as a reminder like to never give up, to not stop. Like you will get this someday, and that helped me through that. To be
That's
like,
awesome.
you're right. I'm gonna get there. So when it was announced I was doing Green Arrow, he texted me and we talked about it and stuff. And it was just kind of like, man, it's so crazy. Like I really did not think I would get here. And in a weird way, it's a bit more personal to me than some of the other books I work on in a weird way because I'd wanted it for so long and it feels very surreal. But yeah, we tried and it finally came together. It was like a weird confluence of events that just sort of just came together and I was like, okay, cool, we're doing it. And I stand and then Sean Isaac, who is the artist, we reached out to him and we're like, well, do you want to do it? And he was like, Green Arrow is my favorite character. Of course. I like, please, yes, I can't believe this, and then he and I started talking and it turned out we had a lot of the same favorites. We knew a lot of the same stories and we had a shorthand automatically of like, well, I'm doing this, you're doing this, and it just took off from there. And then the first thing he did was that cover. Like we
Oh, that's
sat
so
down, we
good.
talked about it. Yeah, I gave him a list and I was like, here's what I'm thinking, and I think we do it like this. And he was like, cool, I got it. And then he ran with it, and that's the cover. Yeah, it's been very surreal. I still can't believe it sometimes. And like I look at issue one, and issue one is it's an emotional issue, and I'm just like, man, I can't believe we got here. Like it's so crazy, and it's been really fun because it's a lot of fan servicey stuff. So like I was saying before, though, it is a bit like if you're a Green Arrow fan, this is gonna be for you. My hope is if you've never read Green Arrow before, you're like, you still get what you need to enjoy it. But it's definitely not a year one type story. It's very much a like I feel this is a story that's been need to be told for like 15 years. So I'm just really glad that we're here and we were able to make it happen.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I think of all the announcements, don't get me wrong, like I was excited for a lot of them. I fucking texted my brother. I'm like, dude, Williamson, Green Arrow. I
Yeah,
was like,
dude,
I
it's
was so
crazy.
stoked, like because Green Arrow is one of my favorite characters. And when you told me the last time that you wanted to
Mhm.
write it, all I had been thinking about since then was like, fuck, I hope he gets to write that book. I hope he gets to write that book.
Yeah,
So when the announcement came out, obviously I'm excited for you on Superman 2, but Green Arrow is just like he's
yeah,
been missing in DC Comics. There has not been a Green Arrow series in quite some time, and I think
dude.
it's
I know we talked about this last time, and I actually didn't realize how long it had been. Like
yeah.
I didn't realize it had been as long as it had been, and then it was like, oh man, it was just because it was issue 50,
Hmm.
and that was a while ago. Yeah, I again, it's been very surreal, and it is funny. Like I joke around with DC about it sometimes, where I'm like, I'll do these interviews like we're doing now, and then so like I did an interview last night, and we were talking about Superman, and Green Arrow, and so many of the comments, the questions were coming in were about Green Arrow, and I was like, let's talk about Superman too, all right? But I can tell people are excited, and it's good, it's nice. I hope that actually translates into sales. Like that's really the key piece because if it doesn't translate into sales, that would suck. So that's really my major hope is that this excitement is actually a real excitement and that translates into people actually going and pre-ordering the book, because it's such a key piece of this. And,
Hmm.
these books, the characters that aren't Batman, Superman, or Wonder Woman, they need to get that kind of love. And it really comes down to that is people actually going and buying them. It's hard sometimes because like, I talk to DC fans and they're like, this character is my favorite character, and there's no book, and I'm like, well, it's probably because it didn't sell last time, and so that's my hope with this is that excitement is real and that people pre-order Green Arrow,
Yeah.
and that we actually can show DC that there is a real hunger here and a real audience here for it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll definitely be hand selling it at the shop. I've like back full time at a restaurant, but I work
Mm,
Wednesday afternoons and Wednesday nights.
yeah.
So I will be selling the shit out of that book when it comes
Oh,
out
thank
because
you.
I want to, and I tell people this all the time. I'm like, because a lot of customers sometimes will be like, oh, like you just said, like, oh, this character doesn't have a book. I'm like, it's because nobody fucking buys the book. Like if you want that
Yeah,
book to
dude.
exist, do not wait for the trade. At that point, you
Oh
have
no,
to
man,
buy
that's
the
death.
single issues. You know?
Yeah. There's a thing I've talked to some retailers over the years where it's like the whole wait for the trade and the whole like, oh, it'll sell in trade. That is a myth. That is not real.
Mhm.
If it doesn't sell in issues, it probably won't sell in trade anymore. Like I would say there are outliers. There's obvious outliers. It does happen. You know, there are books that will sell really well in trade that did okay in issues. But when you talk to a lot of retailers, it's nowhere near as common as I think people think it is. Like, you have to buy those single issues. Like, that's it. You know,
Yep.
it's hard. I know that. And after all the conversations I've had with people about creating their own books too, it's like, if you don't buy those single issues, man, those trades, it ain't gonna matter. You know, because sometimes those books will get. I can't say this about DC, but I will say this about comics in general.
Mhm.
Sometimes those books, if that trade ain't gonna come out in time to make a difference, you know.
Right. Right.
So it's like you gotta, and it's not just issue ones. It's like issue 2 and issue 3. You know, it's that's really the ticker. And
That's
I
where the
do it a lot
drop off
too.
happens for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I talk about this with other people a lot, where it's like I'm not interested in issue 1 sales. I'm interested in issue 7 sales. You know, like
Mhm.
that was part of, the reason why I was on Flash was for so long, not just because I had a lot of story ideas I wanted to do and I enjoyed it, but because my sales were steady the whole time. You know, like if you're at DC and you're like, yo, his sales never change. They're just staying steady. They would always go up. They would do like this, they're there'd be, hills and valleys, whatever, but I never dipped. And so that was it. It was like, oh, I'm staying steady. And then I do Flash War. We go up a little bit and then we go back down a little bit, but we stayed steady. It was always that. And that's why they were like, leave him alone. Like, like, I would hear from people at DC, like, the attitude is like, he's over there, he's fine, leave him alone, let him continue. It's working, leave him alone. And that's how it is. But yeah, because some books will they just go off a cliff, you
Yeah.
know, and that's what you want to avoid. So it's not just, oh, issue 1 sold a bunch. It's like, I'm not saying it doesn't matter, because obviously it matters, but it's about 2, it's about 3. Like, you have to show there's a real audience here for more than one comic, because otherwise it's not a real audience. People's buying issue 1s.
Right.
We have a lot. I mean, you work at a store, so there's a lot of that.
A lot of
It's
that. A lot of
about,
that.
is there a real audience for this? That's what has been really fascinating to me lately. Is there a real audience for this? Talking to people, talking to retailers about it, and what's actually working and what isn't working. And so you have to be able to maintain that, maintain those sales.
Yeah.
So
Well,
Green Arrow, yeah, pre-order.
yes, pre-order the book. Before we jump into Superman, so you were saying
Yeah.
that it's a mini series at first,
Yeah, so Green
possible.
Arrow it's a 6-issue series.
Okay.
And so the hope is that the sales are strong enough we get an extension. So like Poison Ivy was the same way, right? So Poison Ivy was 6 issues. Issue 1 sold really well and it got extended. So that's the hope, is that if issue 1 does well, issue 2, and it might not. There's no guarantees. There is no guarantees with that.
Right.
It was funny. I saw like I'm very detached from the internet at this point. Like, I don't really look at anything anymore, and I have an assistant that handles a lot of it, and for the most part things are scheduled.
Mhm.
And I think we talked before, like, I have it blocked, so I can't even look at it. Like right now, if you were like, go look at Twitter, I can't look. Like an editor sent me a reference to like an artist on Instagram. I'm like, I can't see it, dude. Like, I can't go look at it because everything's blocked off. I don't keep it on my phone, so I'm like detached from everything. But every once in a while, we announce a book, I will look to be like, all right, how's it going, whatever. And when Green Arrow was announced, because it was the Dawn of DC stuff, I had to do a tweet about it. I saw someone say, I'm really happy about a Green Arrow book, but in this economy, like, I thought that it really like hit me a little bit, because I'm like, oh yeah, because like with everything going on, it's hard times. And so I'm like, I hope the excitement is real. People definitely buy it.
I definitely think it is, and that image, I mean, I definitely love to like deep dive into it with you after maybe a couple issues come out.
Yeah, for sure.
But let's talk Superman. So that kind of, to me, like, was out of left field. Like, I wouldn't have thought that Superman was the next logical choice
What
for
would
you
you
to
think?
jump on. I don't know. I didn't
What do you
really
think?
have.
Justice League? Because everybody thought Justice
I
League. That
mean,
was
kind
always the
of.
thing, and I was like, there is no Justice League. Like,
Yeah, I mean, kind of. It would have made sense for you to do Justice League, but I love that it was Superman, because I think
mhm.
you and Jamal Campbell, that's an awesome
Oh yeah,
fucking team right there.
dude, you got to see it. Yeah, it looks amazing. Jamal is a genius, and
She's insane.
it looks really good. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's great. At one point I thought we had some different conversations while I was writing Dark Crisis, but what I was gonna do next. And so this is like a year ago. It was a while ago. We've been having different talks about what to do, and we talked a little bit about that, but we knew there wasn't going to be a Justice League book. Like, we knew then there was going to be no Justice League, as we started having different conversations, and one of the editors came to me. It was funny. We were talking about Superman, and he was asking me questions about it, and I was so confused because I didn't know what he was saying at first. And I was like, "Wait, are you asking me to write Superman?" And he's like, "Yeah, I am." And I was like, "Oh shit. Well, let me think about it. Let's talk about it. Like, well, I have questions. And so we
Mhm.
talked, and then I started thinking about a story, and I started thinking about the ideas, and I started diving into that world. It was like a year ago. And so it was a really interesting. I did not expect it either. Like that, I'll be honest with you. Like it was not on my radar at that moment. But then it was. And it became very much a part of my life this last year. It was crazy not telling anybody for a while. Like obviously we didn't tell anybody until that day in New York, but I kept it secret for a long time. And so it was interesting when I was working on Dark Crisis, and once Dark Crisis started coming out, and I think there was very much this attitude of like, oh, he's gonna do Justice League afterward, and I was like, nope, there's no Justice League.
So what are your plans like for the book? I know, like you said, you'll never do a long run like you did with Flash, obviously. But I mean, you're like you had a short stint on Batman, which
Yeah.
I thought maybe you were going to be on that for a little bit longer, but then
No, there's the Batman stuff. We'll probably talk about more later this year. But with Batman, obviously things changed when James left.
Mhm.
And the plan before had been for me to write the crossover issues for Shadow War, and my schedule was so slammed. It was so slammed. Um, and when James quit, and was leaving, and James is like one of my best friends, so I was very well aware of what was happening, and he were talking about it before we even talked to DC. When DC came to me at first, I said no because I knew it was gonna be temporary. I knew it
Mhm.
would be temporary, but it would mostly lead into Shadow War, and there were other things going on because I also knew that Batman versus Robin was coming, and I knew a lot of stuff, but also my schedule was so screwed. Like I was dying. Like I was going to burn out, but then I was like, okay, I'm already gonna write this many issues of Batman. Can I add a few more? And then we talked about it, and I ended up making it work. But the plan was always for me to leave that book and then go on to do other things. And so it's like, and but the Dark Crisis was like my entire life. Like that was such a major thing. So yeah, with Batman, I only did it for a little bit. With Superman, I'm on it for the long haul. It's a much larger thing.
Okay.
It's not going to be like Flash, where it was 101 issues plus all the annuals. I mean, I think I ended up writing like 108 issues total, really, with
Right.
with Flash. With this, I have the story. Like I know all the stuff I want to do. I know all the pieces, and so I'm not exactly sure how many issues it's going to be, but I definitely have big plans for the character and big ideas for what I want to do. And so it is a big story.
Okay.
I'm doing shorter arcs though, so it's like 2 or 3 issue arcs to start off, where it's like these kind of monster of the week things. So it's like, the first 3 issues are with Parasite, and so it's like I'm doing these much shorter little clips. Partially because I've done all these big things, I'm kind of like, let's get down and do these shorter arcs for a minute. That's sort of where my head is at with it. But I have a lot of plans, and obviously Superman is in it.
Yeah.
Clark Kent, Lex Luthor, Jimmy Olsen, and Lois. Like I have a lot of stuff there, and then playing around a lot with Clark's villains, and then introducing new villains to the Superman mythology. Like when I was
Mhm.
on Flash, one of my goals was to be like, I'm gonna play with the entire mythology, like everything here. And I want to do the same thing with Superman. I was like, I want to play with all the toys, and then add some toys. That's always the fun part. Add some stuff to it. So that's
Yeah.
what we're doing.
Yeah, I'm very excited about it. I mean, I think that like what Philip Kenny Johnson's been doing with like Action Comics was like one of my favorite Superman stories in a long time. I thought it was like very
Hmm.
different from what we've got. Um,
Yeah.
like much like Green Arrow, I was just a little less like didn't wasn't equal because Green Arrow is like one of my favorites, but I was very stoked. And my brother, who Superman's his favorite character, like he
Hmm.
was also very happy to see that you're on the book. I know
Yeah.
that Clark's identity, like the secret identity, is back,
Yeah,
right?
it's back. Yeah. And then the stuff that Philip is doing, he's going to continue some of his plots in Action Comics, and he's going to have Connor and Kara and we're missing Steel, and he's going to
Mhm.
have a lot of, and Keenan, like he has a lot of stuff he's doing over there, and then obviously John Kent will be over in Adventures of Superman. Like we have part of this is about like we recognize that the last couple of years has been very Batman heavy,
Right.
And so, how do you get away from that? Well, and I'm funny with this because I, grew up in the '90s or reading regularly in the '90s, and I'm like, yo, you think there's a lot of Batman books now? You have no idea what was going on then. I mean, there was way more Batman books 20, 30 years ago, but there was also multiple Superman books,
Hmm.
and there were multiple Green Lantern books, and you had like a bit more of a variety. And I think one of the things we've talked about a lot the last couple of years is like we got to get back to that, and that's part of what Dawn of DC is too. Is you see all these books, and if you look at the stuff that we're building throughout this year, you're going to see a lot more books that are not Batman books, and that's why with Superman, it was like, okay, well, Superman's a big piece of that. So having action, having the John Kent book, and having the Superman family over here, and you'll start to see more of that over the course of the year.
And is there going to be any like connectivity between you guys, or are you guys kind of like doing your own
Well,
thing?
there'll definitely be connective tissue, and like Philip and I talk, and I talk to Tom, and Tom. I'm not sure how much spoilers I want to get into Tom's book, but we definitely all talk to each other about trying to find places for that connective tissue. My Superman book, I mean, my first 3 issues all take place in one day, so it's hard to be like. I was talking about this last night on a podcast where I was like, it's impossible for all of comics to start on Monday. Do you know what I mean? It's not like everyone's starting to work on Monday in every issue of DC. That's
Yeah.
impossible. So you have to kind of find this balance of making it feel cohesive without making readers feel like they have to read everything. You want it to feel like you could read Action of Superman and get a bigger picture. But if you chose to just read Action, you get what you need. If you chose to just read Superman, you get what you need. And one of my goals for my Superman title is just make it as accessible as possible. So we definitely do talk to each other, and we have plans on some connective things we want to do later on. But I think, especially in the beginning, you're going to see them act independently, even though we will reflect each other and make sure we're in line with each other. It'll probably be a bit before we start really crossing over. I mean, Philip and I have talked about it a lot, and there actually are some points that we know we want to connect with. It's just gonna be a matter of scheduling and you know a couple things that we're doing idea wise. You'll see. You'll see.
Yeah, I'm very stoked to see what's going on. I mean, the DC books got to the shop early, so I already read
Oh,
Action 1051,
yeah,
which I
yeah. That's what
really
you
dug. I
saw.
thought that
Yeah.
was a really dope issue. Yeah,
Hmm.
so I'm very
Yeah,
excited to
Philip's
see
great.
what's coming up.
Yeah, no, Philip's awesome. He's good.
So Superman is ongoing. Green Arrow is a mini series, and
Yeah,
then
hopefully
you're
ongoing. Fingers
hopefully
crossed.
hopefully
Yeah,
ongoing, and then you have Dark Ride that's on
yeah,
hiatus until April. Is
yeah,
there
yeah.
anything else? I mean, I know you're not going to tell me if and what it is, but
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm working on like if I look at my calendar, yeah, I have to be careful sometimes. I forget what's been announced or not. I'm working on, I would say, like three other. I feel like I'm missing something, but I'm working on three other DC projects at the same
mhm,
time that haven't been announced yet. That will be announced for a while in some places. But yeah, I'm definitely working on some sort of stuff for DC. And then I'm doing obviously Dark Ride, like you said, and then
yeah,
I'm working on some other creator owned stuff that's just way too early to announce. It's way too early to even talk about it. I want to get more issues in the can. When we did Nailbiter, we made sure Nailbiter stayed on schedule, and that was because Mike and I, when issue 1 of Nailbiter came out, we were working on issue 6, and we always tried to stay ahead as much as we could, and not take really long breaks or anything like that. And so with my creator owned work, I really try to make that happen. But yeah, I'm working on a lot. I have a lot on my plate. There's always a lot on my plate.
well, I mean, I'm here for all of it. I'm digging Dark Ride. I love that you and Andre
Oh,
Bresson
thanks, man.
reunited after finishing Birthright to come together and do
Yeah,
an awesome book. I know we're kind of wrapping up on time.
that's all
Because
right. Yeah.
but I real quick, dude, I just want to
Yeah, what's
hear
up?
a little bit about like where the idea for that came from, because it is like definitely,
Over Dark Ride?
yeah.
Oh, dude, yeah, all right. Well, okay, so Dark Ride, I am obsessed with amusement parks, and I grew up in California, Southern California, and we have a lot of amusement parks there.
Yeah.
I'm in Portland now, but I was there before. And, I would go to Disneyland all the time. I would go to Knott's Berry Farm, go to Magic Mountain, go to SeaWorld, go to Universal. There were other like not just like fairgrounds. I had rides and had fun houses, and I was always obsessed with that. I loved fun houses, just the look of them.
Mhm.
I would go to that stuff all the time, and I love it. Actually, when I was in high school, I knew I wanted to do comics, but sometimes comics felt like an impossible thing. You hear when I was a kid, everyone told me comics there was no money there. You would never make, or you would never make it, right? Like it was really challenging, and so I would hear that a lot. And then I was thinking about going into like Imagineering, and developing rides, and that was something else I thought about in high school. Because I really love like it, creating experiences is what they really talk about it, and like you look at just I mean I was always fascinated about like the theming of Disneyland, the theming of these rides and these experiences, and I loved it. I loved it, and so it was something that I always wanted to do. I never didn't get to do, obviously, right? And I'm very happy working in comics, but what part back of my brain is still obsessed with it, right? So I still go to amusement parks. I still read about amusement parks. I follow, accounts that are about amusement parks. I read a lot of books. I watch videos.
Mhm.
There's ones that are overseas that I would like to go to, but I've already seen all the videos about them. It's like I've always loved it, and so for a long time, I was always like, it was Skybound. They knew this. I was always trying to find a way to do a book that took place in a amusement park, and I could never figure it out. And then one day, I think it was 2019. It might have been 2020, but I'm pretty sure it was 2019. Oh no, you know what? It had to have been the end of 2019. So it was toward the end of 2019. I had moved into this office before my son was born, but I had just moved to this office, and I was just eating breakfast on a Saturday morning by myself, and I was in the living room, and it just clicked in my head. Like it kind of came together. The first 9 pages of issue 1, I just
Mhm.
boom saw it, and I was like, "Oh, that's what happens. Oh, and this what happens, and then this happens. Okay, then this happens." Like it all came together. And I remember I ran in here and I wrote those first 9 pages first, and I just wrote them like boom, boom, like Saturday morning, just knocked it out one day, and I was like, "Okay, I think I know what I'm doing." And that did not change. Those 9 pages didn't change between then and when what was finally published in you know 2022. So it took 3 years,
Mhm.
but it didn't really change. And then I just sort of started thinking about like, wait a minute, all right, it's a horror themed amusement park. What happens in the park? What's going on? What's the dynamics of this family? And like all ideas. Once these certain pieces, these certain dominoes fall, then the rest start filling in the blanks. You start figuring it out, and that's just kind of what happened. With that book, it's just my obsession. I also love horror movies, so that's it. It's like I love horror movies. I love everything. I love horror comics. I love anything involving horror. I really love amusement parks. Got to find a way to marry those things together, and that's what most of my work is. It's like I take two things I'm obsessed with and I put them together, and that's what Birthright was. That's what Nailbiter was. What Ghosted was. So that's always. It's funny how that seems to be the repeating history for me. Is it's like finding two great tastes and putting them together. Making a little PB and J. I guess that's sort of what I keep figuring out.
Yeah, I mean, I love the book. I was super stoked to hear because I know the last time we talked that you said you had a lot of ideas in your notebook
Hmm.
for all your creative stuff, but you didn't have anything solidified in terms of like when something was going to come out. So I
Yeah, it's
was,
still like that too.
yeah,
Yeah, I have a lot of ideas. I was talking to artists right before we started talking. I was talking to other artists, and we were gaming out like other creator-owned ideas and stuff. So I have a lot of stuff I'm working on for creator-owned. It's just a matter of when, and like putting this stuff together and taking our time to make it happen versus trying to rush anything. So yeah,
all
a
right.
lot of cool stuff coming. A lot of comic
Yeah,
books. A lot of
lot
comic
of good
books.
stuff coming from you, and
Yeah.
I'm stoked to see it all. And I know you got to get going, so I just want to
Yeah.
thank
Yeah.
you so much for
Yeah.
taking
Thank
time to
you.
chat with me, man.
Yeah, thanks again. I'm glad we got to talk and hang out a little bit, and we'll talk again maybe when Green Arrow starts coming out, so we can jam on some Green Arrow fandom.
Yes, I'm definitely down to do that, man. Thank you again, and we'll talk soon.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.